Okay, good evening. My name is David Cashman. I'm with SEB Housing, and this is the information session for the affordable homeownership unit at Village at South Street. I'll be giving this presentation both to the YouTube live audience. That presentation will be available after the fact, so if anyone missed it and wants to come back later and view it, it will still be available online. There's also a live phone call, a conference call for households to join that way. That one obviously won't be available later. But in either case, purpose of this evening is to give you a little bit more background information about what this opportunity is, a little bit more about the units, what the application process and eligibility requirements are, how to apply, when to apply by, how to submit your application, what the lottery how that will work and what that will look like. But mostly it's for anyone who's watching information. So if you have questions to the household who's on the conference call, if you want to just shout out your questions to me, please feel free to do that. Generally, I'll be sort of going through the information that's in the information packet. If you haven't already, I would recommend, if you have access to a computer, go on the computer, go on our website, www.sebhousing.com. When you go there, you'll find a page that has affordable housing opportunities. Click that box, and then there will be opportunities for homeownership and for rental. Click on the homeownership ones, and you'll find Village at South Street. And on that page, you can find the application, you can find a photo and some information about the income restrictions and asset restrictions. You can find the application, you can find the information packet, and you can find the sample deed rider. And so the information I'll be going over this evening, which will probably be anywhere from about 50 minutes to an hour, depending on, or 45 minutes to an hour, depending on whether anyone watching has questions. The information that I review will be largely the information that's in the information packet. So that's a great resource to you if you haven't seen it already, and it is downloadable directly from our website. So you can kind of go through it at your own pace and on your own time. And again, the important thing to note is, this session is for anyone who's watching information. So to the household watching, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. Sometimes I know that, we don't know necessarily what our questions are until later on, and we've started filling out an application, and the application asks for a certain document, and then the question arises, and that's fine too. You can always call us or email us if you find that you have questions as you're going through this process. I would say too, let me just apologize for scheduling this on a holiday. That was a complete accident by me. I didn't realize my schedule I didn't have this noted as a holiday, so I am sorry. But the good news is that this information session and the materials that I'll be covering are still available going forward. So if you're not able to attend in real time, you can always come back, find that information packet on our website, or review this session after the fact by just going to the link in YouTube, and it'll still be there. And of course, we'll be here if you want to just call us or email us with questions. The best email is the one listed on the front page of the application, which is info@sebhousing.com. And you can call us at 617-782-6900 extension 2. So, okay, so this is the information about the affordable unit at Village at South Street in Plymouth. And just to be clear, we are an offsite affordable housing lottery consultant. We are not the builder. We were hired by the builder to conduct a lottery in this information session and to interact with households who are interested. But ultimately, at some point, which we'll talk about as we go through this, after we run the lottery, we'll be handing the top household off to the developer and their sales team to engage in the home buying process. And we'll continue to be involved in that process. But just so you're clear, we are not the developer. We are not the builder. We're not even on site. We're in Needham. We're not down in Plymouth. If you're familiar with this area, you know it's between Route 3 and Route 3A in Plymouth, so very conveniently located. If you're trying to get places, you've got 2 major thoroughfares right there. It's also very near Cape Cod Bay, which is nice. It's near various green spaces and also various commercial retail spaces. It looks like there's restaurants in the area. There's a CVS, there's a car dealership, there's schools in the area, there's Miles Standish State Forest, there's the Kingston Collection, which I think is a whole mall with a Target and a Sky Zone and a Macy's. So there's a lot right in that area, a lot to recommend it, a lot of reasons why you might want to live in that area. And obviously Plymouth is not too far from Boston. As far as the actual development itself, this is a subdivision. So these are single family homes, and this subdivision has been built out over a number of years. So I think in total there were 3 or 4 affordable units at this development. This is the last one to be delivered. And in total, there are 10 houses in this development, which again is near the town library, the high school, and downtown Plymouth. This particular home will have about 1,750 square feet. It's 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bathrooms. It has 3 parking spaces vis-a-vis a 1-car garage and a driveway. There's a front porch. It's very much got that nice cape feel with the capey shingles, kind of muted gray. There's radiant heat in the first floor by way of forced hot water, which is heated by natural gas. The windows will be very high-end. They'll be Anderson 400 series, which will allow it to be a very efficient house to heat. It features an open floor plan. There's a lot of windows and natural light. And just if you're wondering, I do have a photo, actually. So this is sort of a photo of the front. This is, I don't know if this is the actual home or another one in the development, but I think it'll look pretty similar to what you see here. So you see those capey shingles, and you can see the driveway with the 1-car garage and the front porch. And we do have some floor plans, renderings, drawings. If anyone is interested in seeing those, please feel free to get in touch with us, and I can email them to you. I'll just email right now what our contact is. So if you're interested in seeing those, or just for general questions, you could email us at info@scbhousing.com. Okay, so this home is going to be sold at an affordable price to households making up to 80% of the area median income. And that sales price is $320,000. There's a monthly HOA fee of $25 a month, which covers common electricity. There's snow plowing, landscaping, common taxes, and a capital fund. The affordable price, just so you know, is the price, okay? And that price doesn't fluctuate or change depending on who the applicant is that ultimately gets to move forward in this process. In this program, affordable prices are set pursuant to a formula wherein a household making up to 80% of the area median income shouldn't be spending more than 30% of their gross income on the costs of the home. And so it also factors in taxes and HOA fees and interest rates and a number of other calculations. But what it doesn't factor in is each particular applicant's income and assets. So it's not going to shift up or down. $320,000 is the price of this affordable unit, and it's significantly less than other homes, market rate homes, in this same development. Now, just in case anyone is watching this and thinking, wow, I could get, a home for this price and maybe in a year or two I'll sell it and make a killing. These homes have a deed rider, which restricts what you can sell the home for, and which ensure that the homes stay affordable in perpetuity. So I don't think that's something that, you know, many households assume you might be able to do. But in the event you were wondering, this is not like a buy the house and flip it and make a whole bunch of money type of opportunity. There's a deed rider that gets filed, that gets recorded at the time of the closing, which ensures that the house stays affordable in perpetuity and gets sold to another eligible, affordable buyer at an affordable price. I can't tell you exactly what that price will be because it depends on factors that will be established in future years. You know, typically it will go up some, and you can, you know, build some equity in the home, but it's not going to necessarily track the increase that you might see in among market rate homes. It's probably going to be a more limited increase that you could realize, but still potentially some, and maybe a decent amount depending on how long you own the home. So, you know, when you're sort of thinking about this opportunity, I think it can be helpful to think about it in a couple of steps. The first being applying, and, you know, how do you apply and who's eligible? So there's kind of a couple major criteria of eligibility. The first is that everyone in the home must be a first-time home buyer. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The entire household's income and assets must be under the limits established by the program and which are applicable to the area that covers Plymouth, because there are various different areas with different income limits. Households, when submitting their application, must submit a mortgage pre-approval. And finally, households or their family members cannot have a financial interest in the development or be a related party. I'm not going to circle back on that one like I will the others, because it's not, I don't think there's a whole lot to say there, but the developer is Salvalinus LLC and Phil Cronin. Again, that's Salvalinus LLC, Phil Cronin. So if you're related to Phil or anyone at that entity, or work for them in some way or have some money tied up in this deal, that would be a disqualifying factor. But if you don't, then you don't need to worry about that. So let's just go through those in a little bit more detail. So the first is, you know, probably comes as no surprise, is this is affordable housing, and, you know, the home is being sold at an affordable price, which is considerably less than equivalent market rate homes in the same development. That in order to be eligible, households must be under certain income limits. And those income limits are established each spring by HUD. HUD publishes them, and they're broken down by various geographic areas. Within just the state of Massachusetts, there are, I don't remember exactly, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 different geographic areas. Plymouth is part of the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy area, which covers dozens and dozens of municipalities, and has the highest income limits of anywhere in the state. Those income limits are broken down by household size. Okay, they're broken down by household size. So, and this is in the informational materials, so you don't need to memorize the numbers that I'm about to state. You can just find them in the info pack or on our website or in the ad or application. They're in all those places, but the maximum incomes permitted are, for a household size of 1, $70,750. For a household size of 2 is $80,850. Household size of 3 is $90,950. Household size of 4 is $101,050. Household size of 5 is $109,150. And for a household size of 6 is $117,250. Now, let's talk a little bit more about those income limits. That's gross income, okay? That's not take home. That's not after any deductions or taxes or withholdings. That's gross income that we're talking about. It's the income for everyone in the household. So for all household members, must add up to something that is less than the applicable income limit. So if you're 2 people, You would take yours and your co-applicants' incomes, add them up. You'd have to be under $80,850. Again, it's gross income, and and the way that income is calculated is as a projection going forward over the next 12 months. Now, necessarily, it's impossible to say what anyone is going to definitively earn in the next 12 months. Things can change, but that's how the program says we have to calculate it. And in determining what someone's going to make in the next 12 months, the best indicator is obviously what they're making now and what they've been making. And so when you're looking through the application, you'll see that we're asking for things like your 3 most recent pay stubs and your 3 most recent years of taxes and various other pieces of income documentation that demonstrate what you've been making recently, as those are the best predictors of what you'll be making going forward. Now, if you have conclusive evidence that shows, hey, I was making X, but I'm actually going to make less than X moving forward, that's something we can consider. But in general, you need to have an established pattern that shows that you'll be making less. So, comes up sometimes a household's been working tons of overtime. It's reflected in all their pay stubs, and they'll say, well, I won't be working any overtime, starting next month. And to that, we have to say, well, your record establishes that you've been working overtime. You don't have any history really of not working this overtime. We can't just sort of take you at your word. You'd have to be able to show that, in X months you work overtime and in Y months you don't, and that there's some history there. So we're projecting for 12 months for all household members. Now, there are certain exceptions to that. For people in the household who are under the age of 18, we don't count their income towards the income limit. So if there's a 16-year-old member of the household who will be living there, and they have a job and they make $5,000 or $10,000 a year, great. We're not counting any of that. Now, it's income from employment that we're not counting, right? So a 16-year-old who has a job who makes $5,000 or $10,000 a year, we are not counting that. But if it's a 16-year-old who has a trust and they get distributions of, $1,000 a month, so it's $12,000 a year, that would count. Okay, so the distinction for those who are under the age of 18 is whether it's income from employment or income from some other source. Income from employment being the one that we don't count, income from other sources being something we may have to count. And we also don't count the income of full-time students who are dependents, income over $480. So if you have a 19-year-old kid who's a full-time student and on the side they're doing all their work and they have a job, and let's say they make $10,000 a year, that's great. We're only counting $480 of that, and the rest we do not count towards the income limit. And income, when you fill out the application, you'll see there are various income sources that we list, and we do that because there are the income sources that come most readily to mind, like income from your job, which certainly counts. But in this day and age especially, there are various other ways in which people make money that, we don't always think of as counting, that are not the first things that come to mind when we say income, but which the program says we must count as income. So there's the money you make at your job. Maybe you also are self-employed. You have a little side job that you have. That's great. That also counts. I will say for self-employment, we're looking at your net income, okay? Because you might have operating expenses that you will. Almost any job you're going to have operating expenses that come right off the top. Expenses that you have to make your job work, to make your business go. So we do factor those in, and we're counting your net income if you're self-employed. Okay, but for other W-2 employees, we're looking at your gross income. Other sources of income that are not ones that necessarily come readily to mind, or if you're receiving child support or alimony, or maybe you have Social Security income or Social Social Security disability income. If you have a pension that you're drawing down from regularly, that would count as income. Perhaps you receive unemployment compensation or workman's compensation or severance pay. Maybe you receive periodic payments from family or friends. That one actually comes up with some frequency. And that one's, there's a little bit of gray area because it really, whether we count it depends in large part on the frequency. Okay, and so if it's a regular recurring gift that you receive, then we would need to count that as income. If it's really sporadic or occasional, then that wouldn't count. But that does come up sometimes. You know, someone maybe has a benefactor or uncle or loved one who, you know, maybe gives them $500 a month to help with groceries. That's great. That counts as income. You may have assets that you own that generate interest, and that also counts as income. So the point is not to cover every conceivable source of income that people may have, but more so when you're filling out the application to take your time going through that chart and really make sure that you are considering all sources of income that you may have. Because as you'll see in the application, we are not actually requiring that households submit taxes or pay stubs or bank statements, or if you're self-employed, a profit and loss statement. We're not requiring any of that with the lottery application. We are evaluating your eligibility for the lottery based purely on what you tell us your income and assets are, okay? But after the lottery, for a top household or two who's invited to move forward, you will have to provide all of the documentation that demonstrates your eligibility. And so, you know, failing to include a source of income or a certain asset that you may have for purposes of getting into the lottery ultimately isn't going to do you any service later on down the road, because if you are invited to move forward, you know, most likely that income or asset's going to show up, and it may end up bumping you over the applicable limits. So for your own purposes too, you really want to look through that income, and in a second we'll talk about assets, those tables in the application to make sure you don't overlook something. And you know, and in so doing, maybe you think I'm eligible. I've looked through the materials. I've listed what my income is. You know, I'm a household size of 1. I make, you know, $62,000. Great. I'm under the income limit. Well, turns out that you totally failed to consider the, let's say it's alimony that you receive as a source of income, and that's, you know, $15,000. And turns out, well, actually your income's more in the realm of 75, not 60. And now you're over the income limit. So for your benefit, take your time going through the application, and particularly the income table that we have in there, to make sure that you're considering all sources of income that you may have. Assets we have to look at as well. All households members shall not have total gross assets exceeding $75,000 in value. So like income, we're looking at all household members' assets, and we're adding them up and making sure that they do not exceed $75,000. Now, assets include any monies that a household would use as a down payment on the home. I've seen that question more than once. A household will say, well, I have $100,000 in assets, but I'm going to spend 40 of it on a down payment, so really I only have 60, and that's less than 75, so I'm good, right? And the answer is, well, actually, no. The money that you would use as a down payment on the home still does count. And assets like income, you know, there are many different sources of assets that people may have. And for that reason, we've tried to, for your benefit too, to include a table in the application with various different sources of assets that may count. Now, you may notice that, you know, personal assets like, let's just say jewelry always kind of comes to mind, or a car that you may have, a collection of items let's say, we're not interested in items of personal property. Those do not count. But things like bank accounts, many households have a checking account or a savings account, or maybe they have multiple at different banks or several within the same bank. And so, you need to provide, you need to account for the money that you have in your checkings and savings accounts. You might have a CD at a bank where you put the money in for a certain amount of time, and you can't touch it, and you get a slightly better interest rate. And then after whatever it is, 6 months or a year, then you can access that money. That similarly counts as an asset. Money transfer applications are a good one that's very easy to fly under the radar. And in fact, I think I would easily overlook that one. PayPal, Venmo, other Cash App applications. That money that you have in there is in many ways no different than the money sitting in your checking or savings account. That money in my, let's say, Venmo account can be used to pay bills or other, if I owe money. And so that money counts, and you'd have to provide statements showing the amount of money in your Venmo account or your PayPal account. You may have a retirement account or 401k or IRA, and that one, the question often comes up, and people say, well, what if I'm not, what if I'm 35 years old or 40 years old and I'm not planning on touching that for another 25 or 30 years? I totally get that, and maybe it seems almost like it's a little unfair that we would count it, but the fact is the program says that we must count it, and in most cases, that money actually is accessible. Now, there may be a big penalty that you would have to pay if you try and withdraw it early, but that net cash value, that post-penalty amount, is what we would have to count towards your asset limit. And if that's the case, you may need to get a statement from the administrator of that plan that says, Joe Smith has a 401k valued at X, and if Joe were to withdraw that money today, he would pay a penalty of Y, and the resulting amount that Joe would be able to get would be Z. And so Z is what we would be counting. Now, one exception to that is if that is a retirement account, like sometimes happens with a pension or other certain retirement accounts, if you actually cannot access that money without leaving the job or retiring, then in that case, we would not be able to count that money. But if you can technically access the money, even if you would pay a penalty, then it is money that we would have to count towards your asset limit. And then there are other things like you may own you may own stocks, bonds, mutual funds. You may have an investment property. If you're getting down payment assistance, I already noted how sometimes the question arises where a household will say, I have $100,000, but I'm going to use 40 towards the down payment, so I actually have 60. And I have to say, nope, you have 100. I'm sorry, the money that you're going to use on the down payment still counts. Similarly, a one-time gift from a family member or loved one, that type of down payment assistance also does count. And obviously, if you own real estate, that is an asset, and the equity that you have in the home from selling it would count towards the asset limit. Now, that's a good segue into our second kind of major eligibility category, which is that households must be first-time home buyers, which means that no member of the household may have owned a home within the preceding 3 years. Okay, no member of the home may have owned a home within the preceding 3 years. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule, where notably are a displaced homemaker. So if you're someone who's owned a home with a partner and primarily worked without remuneration in the home for a number of years, and now you're getting divorced from the partner and the home is going to be sold, even if you've owned that home within the past 3 years, that would be an exception to the rule that says you cannot have owned a home in the past 3 years. Or similarly, a single parent, someone who's owned a home with a partner and is now separating from the partner and either has a child or is pregnant and the person must at least have joint custody or sole custody, but they must at least have joint custody. And then the other one that comes up sometimes are for age qualified households. So at least one member of the household who's the one who is selling the home must be age 55 or over. There are a few others too you can read about in the information packet, like properties that were not in compliance with building codes. I think these things virtually never come up, so I won't spend much time talking about it, but you can read about it in the information packet in the event that may apply to you. But again, those are exceptions to the rule which says that to be eligible for this opportunity, households cannot have owned a home in the past 3 years. Now, even if a household meets that exception or one of those exceptions, say they are a displaced homemaker, they still must sell the home, or they must sell the home prior to being able to move forward in this opportunity. Now, they need not have actually sold it at the time they apply, but they will have to have sold it before they can enter into a purchase and sale agreement. And similarly, some of those exceptions revolve around households who may have been married and now are getting divorced. In those cases, if you are trying to move forward at this opportunity without your spouse who you are in the process of separating from, you can do that, provided the process of separation has begun, but the separation must be finalized before you're able to reserve a home, because we need to be able to see the final disposition of assets and income through the divorce, so we know if you're actually eligible. We can't have households moving forward, entering into a reservation for a home or a purchase and sale for a home without knowing what the final outcome of the divorce is, what assets they're getting, what the, if there's alimony or child support or all of these other things that get decided in a divorce. There's a lot of questions that need to get decided that influence the divorcing partner's income and assets, and so we need to have those resolved before we can have households moving forward. So again, the separation or divorce doesn't need to be finalized when a household applies, but it would need to be finalized shortly after the lottery. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about the process, the lottery process itself, and how priorities are given. This is a 3-bedroom home, and the program requires that we give priority to larger household types who need all of the bedrooms in the home. And so what that means is that when you fill out an application, one of the first questions that you're going to be asked is what household type you are. You can be a type 1, a type 2, or type 3 household, and those types correspond to the number of bedrooms that the program says you need. So what that means is that if you end up checking a box saying you're a type 1 household, that means the program says that you're a household who only needs 1 bedroom. And if you're a type 2 household, you're someone who the program says only needs 2 bedrooms. And type 3, the same thing. Now, there are various compositions of households that can make up the various different types. Just, should be fairly self-explanatory. When you're filling out the application, you just find your household composition and check the appropriate box. So, just as an example, you'll see if you're a 5-person household, you're a type 3 household. You have 5 people in your household, you need 3 bedrooms. But if you're a single-person household, you're a type 1 household. You might like 3 bedrooms, but you don't need 3 bedrooms. You only need 1 bedroom. And the relevance of that is that when we do the lottery, similar to most lotteries, being picked earlier in the process is beneficial and more advantageous to you, but it's not the sole determining factor in determining who's going to get the first opportunity to buy this home. We have to factor in other things, including, and very importantly, household type. When we create the waiting list from the lottery, and the waiting list will establish the order of priority that households will have the opportunity to buy this unit, type 3 households will be at the top of the list, independent of where they're drawn in the lottery drawing. And they'll be followed by type 2 households, who will be followed by type 1 households. If you're curious how the waiting lists are constructed, you can read about it in the information packet. It's on page 14. But it's just important to know when you're applying kind of where you are on that totem pole, because if you're a type 1 household, you can absolutely still apply, and you still may even have a shot at getting this unit. But you just need to know that if there are other households who apply who are type 2 or type 3 households, they're bigger households who need more bedrooms, they are going to be higher on the list than you are. Independent of where you're drawn in the actual lottery drawing, they will have first opportunity. They will be higher on the list than you are. Let me talk a little bit about the mortgage pre-approval that's required. So when you submit your lottery application, you don't need to submit all of the income and asset and tax documentation that eventually will be required of top households, but you do need to submit a mortgage pre-approval, not a pre-qualification. Okay, not a pre-qualification, but a mortgage pre-approval. And what I recommend you do is there are certain mortgage pre-approval standards, certain requirements. For example, it's got to have a fixed interest rate through the full term of the mortgage. It's probably going to be 30 years. It cannot be an adjustable rate mortgage. It has to have no more than 2 points. It can't be an FHA or VA loan. It cannot be more than, you cannot finance more than 97% of the purchase price of the home. You got to come up with a down payment of at least 3%, half of which must come from your own funds. So that means you'd have to come up with 1.5% of the overall purchase price from your own funds. So what I would recommend is we list what the mortgage pre-approval standards are in detail on page 10 of the information packet. You should make a copy of that page separately. And then also on that page, we list a website. It's the www.mhp.net One Mortgage website. You can find that again on page 10 of the information packet. And on that website, you can find various affordable housing lenders, and you can search by geographic area. And that's a great place to look, because those are lenders who should be familiar with the One Mortgage, which is kind of the gold standard of affordable housing mortgage products. And they're people who are obviously very familiar with affordable housing, and they know the rules and regulations, and they know what mortgage products will work and which won't, and which ones are most beneficial to you. Now, you can ultimately go to any lender of your choice. So if you have, Uncle John who's in the business, and you want to give him your business, you certainly can do that. But if he doesn't do any affordable housing lending and knows nothing about it, there is some more of a risk that he could give you a pre-approval without fully understanding what's required. And then ultimately, when it comes to get a mortgage commitment, when you're in the home buying process, he recognizes, oh, wait a second, there's a deed rider that has this, that, and the other thing. This product won't actually work. And now you've got to race to someone else and see if you can get a mortgage commitment from another lender, which is not an ideal place to be. So you can go to any lender of your choice, but if it were me, I'd go to someone familiar with affordable housing so that I know that they can give me a pre-approval and really evaluate me as a buyer with the affordable housing requirements in mind. And so I know that ultimately they're going to have a product that they'll be able to get me when the time comes. I would also recommend on our website, which I mentioned earlier, that's the www.sebhousing.com. That's where you can go to the affordable housing opportunities, and then you can go to the homeownership opportunities, and you can find this opportunity. The sample deed rider is on there. You should print that out and bring it to your lender, okay? Because that deed rider, they ultimately are going to see that deed rider, and it's going to get refiled and recorded when you close on the home. And that deed rider has a number of restrictions on the property. And you want to make sure that the lender is aware of that deed rider to ensure that there's nothing in there that they aren't going to find objectionable and ultimately not be able to give you a loan. So two things. I would bring them page 10 of the information packet, print out an extra copy, or just bring the whole information packet so that they can see what the pre-approval mortgage standards are, and the deed rider, okay, which you can find on our website. And again, purpose here is to just make sure that you're going to someone who's fully going to understand what the requirements are and be able to get you a meaningful pre-approval and ultimately be able to get you a commitment when the time comes. The application deadline for the lottery is November 8th, so you still got about a month. Typically, I recommend getting your application in earlier rather than later. It's not a one bite at the apple type of opportunity. You can submit it to us. If there's anything missing or we have questions about anything or anything looks incorrect, we can let you know and you'll have time to go find the item that's missing or correct the thing that's not correct. Better to do it that way than to wait until the right up against the deadline, so you're not rushing to get anything. And then the actual lottery will be on November 17th, and it'll be in the same forum that we're doing it right now. So it'll be virtual. It'll be I'll be conducting the lottery. When we do the lottery, all the households who were eligible for the lottery will receive a lottery application number, and that number will be in the form of A dot blank blank blank. And so, and the blank 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 is purely the order in which we received your fully eligible application. So if you're the first household to submit a fully complete application to us, you'll be A.001. And if you're the second household, you'll be A.002. Now, those numbers have absolutely no bearing on anything, and certainly no bearing on where you are in the lottery or your opportunity to purchase this unit. They are merely an anonymous identifier to be used in the lottery so that we're not using your name or personal information. But every household who's eligible for the lottery will receive a letter that says, "Dear, Joe Smith, congratulations. Based on the information contained in your lottery application, it appears that you're eligible for this opportunity. Your lottery application is A.005. You applied as a type 3 household." And certain other pieces of information. The lottery is on X date. And so you just want to look at that letter that we send you and make sure that everything in there is accurate and conforms to what you think you put in your lottery application. So, if we say, "Hey, Joe Smith, you're eligible and you're a type 3 household," and you say, "Oh, that's odd. I thought I was type 2. I thought I checked that box." It's possible we made a mistake. So you just read it, let us know, we can fix it. It doesn't happen often, but occasionally we do make a mistake, and certainly helps us if you let us know ahead of time. So the lottery will be on November 17th. And the way these lotteries work is a little different than what most people think of when they think of a lottery. Typically people think of, there's one unit, so one household's going to get picked and no one else gets picked. There's a winner and everyone else is a loser, that type of language. And in these lotteries, it actually works differently. The way it works is that everyone who's eligible for the lottery will get picked out of the box. And just so you know, it's nothing fancy, but here's what the lottery box looks like. I think it needs a little bit of updating. We'll probably do that, do a little project in the next month or two here. But every household who's eligible, we will put their lottery application number on an index card, similar to what I'm showing you right now. We'll put all of the index cards with the lottery application numbers in the lottery box, shake it up, and I will draw them out one by one and hold them up to the screen as I go. Every household will get picked. After doing that, I then have to sort the results to create the waiting list. Because again, there are certain priorities that we have to give. In this lottery, it's just giving priority to larger household types. But what that means is that, if we have, let's say, 5 households in the lottery, and 4 of them are type 3 households, and 1 of them is a type 1 household. And the type 1 household is picked very first in the lottery. They're actually going to be 5th. They're going to be 5th in line. They're not going to be number 1. They're going to be behind all the type 3 households. But point is, I will do the lottery drawing, pull the numbers out, show them up as I go, and then after I have to sort them to create the waiting lists according to the priorities, making sure that the larger household types get priority. And then I will send around that very same evening the waiting lists, which will be ordered top to bottom with households' lottery application numbers. And upon looking at the waiting list, then you'll be able to say, okay, you know, I'm number 2, or I'm number 5, or I'm number 10. And so if you have email, you'll get those waiting lists from me within, you know, an hour or maybe 2 of doing the actual lottery drawing. If you don't have email and you're doing everything, you know, by snail mail, I will put it in the mail to you, and you'll get it maybe a day or 2 later. And so that's kind of, you know, the actual lottery drawing itself goes pretty quickly. It does not take a lot of time to pull the numbers out of the box and show them up. And then, like I said, you'll get the results pretty shortly thereafter. Now, I should have said too, backing up for a second, when you do get that, I talked about that letter that you'll get if you're eligible. That'll have your lottery application number. It'll say, "Dear Joe Smith, congratulations, you're eligible. You know, you're a type 2 household, da 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 da." You'll also get a documents requirements guide. And that guide will let you know in detail exactly what's going to be required of you if you're one of the top households on the waiting list after the lottery. Because again, there is all this income and asset and tax documentation that you'll have to submit to show that you're eligible after the lottery. We're not making you submit it to get into the lottery, but if you're a top household on the waiting list, then after the lottery, you will need to submit that documentation. And so you want to start looking, upon receiving that letter of eligibility from us, you want to start looking through that guide and collecting that documentation. Because to be totally honest, there's a lot that's required. And there's a lot of documents you're going to have to pull together. And, you know, if you wait until after the lottery, you know, you're not going to have a month to pull it all together. You're going to have about a week or 10 days. And so if you do nothing, and then we run the lottery, and then you're the number 1 household on the waiting list, and we say, great, you're number 1. You know, you've got a week to get us all of these different income and asset and tax documents. And you might say, geez, that's a lot of documents to pull together in 1 week. And it is, but it won't be too bad if you've been collecting that stuff ahead of time. So I would recommend, if you're, you know, really interested in this opportunity, and it's a great opportunity, it's going to be beautiful, beautiful home in a nice community, that upon getting that guide, which again you'll get when you get your lottery application number, you start putting together a file, get your last 3 years of taxes, start getting your pay stubs in there, start putting your bank statements in there. Get all of those documents and start building your file, so that if you are one of the lucky households from the lottery who gets invited forward, you've got everything basically ready to go, and you can submit it to us, and that process will not feel hectic or rushed, because you will have been, you know, assembling that file for weeks, and you've got it ready. And then so, you know, so after the lottery, we'll probably invite a few households after the lottery, because in our experience, you know, not every household who gets invited to move forward will be able to move forward. Maybe a household won't actually be eligible. Maybe they'll change their mind, whatever may happen. So, you know, if it's 1 unit, we may end up actually inviting the top 3 households on the waiting list and saying, look, you're in one of the top 3 spots. We're inviting you now to submit all of the income and asset and tax documentation. If you're not in the very first position, then being invited forward is not a guarantee of the opportunity to buy this unit, but we are inviting more households than there is just this 1 unit available, because we want to make sure that if the number 1 household drops out, we have other households ready to go. So once we approve a top household after the lottery, we then submit their file to the state, the Department of Housing and Community Development, who ultimately oversees this program and needs to sign off on our work and make sure that they agree with us that you're eligible. That process usually takes about a week. Once they give us that approval, we then communicate with you and the developer, their sales team. We put you in touch. At that point, you would then engage with them in reserving the home. At the time you reserve the home, you'd have to put down a $500 deposit. When you reserve the home, you'll set a date, which will be at least 10 business days, perhaps more, to sign the purchase and sale agreement. That's a good time, if you haven't already, to perhaps hire an attorney to get involved, because buying a home is a huge purchase. And having an attorney to make sure that you understand what your legal rights and obligations are with respect to buying a home. Having one involved is not a bad idea. In fact, we encourage it. So if that's something you want to do, you absolutely should do it. And then, at that point, things kind of proceed similar to how, an ordinary home purchase would proceed. So you sign a purchase and sale. When you do that, you'll set a date, most likely, to get a mortgage commitment, and you'll set a date for closing. With the purchase and sale agreement, you put down 1.5% of the purchase price minus the $500 deposit that you put down with the reservation. And then at some point, probably within a month or two, you'll need to get your mortgage commitment. And ultimately, once you get that, then you will need to update your file with SEB at that point. And that's because households need to maintain program eligibility all the way up through closing. Okay, so you need to show us right after the lottery that you're eligible for this program, and then in, let's say, 2 months' time, when you've got your mortgage commitment, you need to just do a little bit of an update of your file. It's not starting from scratch. It's not starting over. It's just an update, right? So we'd want to see some updated bank account statements. We want to see some updated pay stubs to make sure that in the last 2 months, since we last reviewed your file, you didn't accept a new position and double your salary, and now you're actually no longer program eligible. So if you are the lucky household who gets to move forward in this process, you want to be updating your file as you go. And so, if you get paid every 2 weeks, then every 2 weeks you get that pay stub, you stick it in your file. At the end of the month, you print out an updated bank statement from your checking and your savings account. You stick that in your file, and then that way, when you get your mortgage commitment and SEB comes back to you and says, hey, we need you to just update your file to make sure that you're still eligible, you can say, no problem, I got it all right here, and you submit it, and that should be easy. And then once you've done that, you should be done. The next last and final step is to close on the unit. That's when the deed rider gets, among other documents, gets recorded. It may benefit you to take a look at the summary of some of the requirements of the deed rider, which is at the very back of the information packet. But you'll see in there things like it's got to be your principal residence. So this is not like you get to buy the home and then just put it on, VRBO or one of those other sites and rent it out or lease it for extended periods. It's not permitted. Certain capital improvements, things that are really required for the structural integrity of the home, may be allowed, although I can't imagine there would be any of those as it's new construction. But if it's something that you might just like, you want to upgrade your countertops, let's say, you could do that too, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to recoup that money later on down the road when you sell the place, because that's just an upgrade that you made for your own sake, something you wanted, not something the house needed. So you can do it, you just can't recoup that cost later on down the road when you go to sell the place. Conversely, if it was something like a required structural capital improvement, like there was something, let's just say, wrong with the roof, although there's not going to be because it's new construction, if you had to fix that, then whatever you spent on that improvement would be something down the road when you're reselling it that you could recapture that cost. upon resale. And again, you'd have to resell it to another affordable buyer at an affordable price, which is determined pursuant to a formula. So that's kind of it. All right. It's been about close to an hour I've been talking. Again, the information that I've gone over is really all just information that's in the information packet, which is available on our website. If you haven't taken a look at it, I'd recommend that you do so soon if you're interested, and then submit an application and get yourself into the lottery for this terrific opportunity. For the households who's calling in, do you have any questions about anything that I've gone over or anything that I didn't go over?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I hope you got something out of it. And if you haven't submitted an application, we hope to see your application soon.
Okay. Thank you.
You got it. Take care. Okay. I'm gonna end the YouTube session as well. And good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.